Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. Let's talk about trauma today. So when I left New Hampshire, I had gone through so many different things. Um, it started with several family members, close family members, having addictions to methamphetamines, and that was during a time where meth was really prevalent in a lot of smaller towns all across our country, and it was changing people's like brain chemicals in some ways. They Each one of them, suffered with severe lying, um, inability to put it away, to not pick it up again. Um, and it was hard. It was hard to sit back and watch that. It was hard to realize that no matter how much talking, no matter how much fighting, no matter how much, you know, pleading, or you had to let it go. You had to let the reality of what their choices are just be what they are. You couldn't, there was no controlling it, which was incredibly sad and incredibly traumatic, especially for somebody who likes, things to be a little more controlled and understandable. Like, none of it was making sense. And not really, being a fairly new drug to me anyway, I didn't know much about it. And I didn't realize just how addictive it could become. So during that time, I'm worried about these three family members, and it turned into, eventually, over time, it turned into a fourth. But in the beginning, it was three. My poor younger sister had to take care of my mom because she was passing, so she came from another state to New Hampshire to take care of our mother. Um, and I tried to spend as much time as I could there, but it was not near enough because I was actually taking care of three of my grandkids during that time, very young kids. And this went on for quite some time, quite like probably about a year. And I think that what I want to share with you is that when you're going through trauma, and if it's not just one form of trauma, if it's various different traumas like I was, um, I look back and I think that the only thing that really saved me through that was um, beginning to look at how I was reacting. So knowing that my financial status was limited, I couldn't, send all four to a facility. I had to do what I could do in the moment, and to just give them encouragement to try to get them tested, to try to get them to realize what's going on and to want to change. But that didn't happen with the ones that were on drugs. And then of course my mom, um, in her suffering, somewhat suffering, she did really well with it, but she had lung cancer, and she was passing, and she knew it and accepted it and told us all that this was how it was going to be. And um, that's also a hard realization. When you realize that we can heal ourselves, um, of many things. Maybe not that, but there were things that could have made it easier on her, and there was things that she could have done that maybe would have alleviated it altogether. We don't know because she never wanted to try. And so that was frustrating. It's heart wrenching when you are losing so much around you, and then I wound up, when I was there, it was Valentine's Day actually, and I was alone with the kids, and I had just put them to bed, and I was just so drained, absolutely drained. I believe my mom had passed at that point. She had passed already, and maybe a couple months before. I'm not really sure the timing because of everything that was going on. My sense of timing for back then and being able to explain it like in a logical way is still difficult. But I can tell you that, I wound up, it was Valentine's Day, I know that, and I wound up on the floor of my kitchen and I just lost it because, as I had mentioned before, I then was diagnosed with cancer for the second time in my life, and it was devastating. And I didn't know. I knew I had to take it more seriously. I knew I had to make some additional changes, and I did. Um, I changed the way I was eating. I was eating vegan completely, and the doctor said that that was great and was going to definitely help the situation. And started to look at all the other things that have been happening. You know, um, After having accepted my mom's passing and wrote her a letter and kind of worked through things that we needed to work through, then it was dealing with my own family and the choices that they were making and how I couldn't control that. So I had to learn to let go. And I think that that's really the first step, that if you're going through trauma, the biggest thing you can learn is to only control the things that you can control. Um, you can offer assistance, and you can provide small amounts of assistance, but you can't do things for other people during these traumatic times, especially if you're suffering, if you're in sadness, if you're in grief. You have to just emotionally and spiritually let things go and let people, um, I guess, suffer the consequences for their own actions, because sometimes um, sometimes that's all there is. That's all you can do, is to just be there, be available when they reach out. But you don't have to feed into, or give money to, or uplift them in their poor choices. And that's not easy. I remember in moments where I just wanted to strangle all of them and just shake them and go, "What is going on with you, and why are you doing this?" But I had my own path I had to follow, and I couldn't at that moment. I could not anymore worry about anything else that was going on around me. And that one of the hardest things I had to do was transition the grandkids while I was sick. I had to transition my grandkids to their other grandparents, and I guess the way I rationalize that is that there was two of them and just one of me. I was working 50, 60 hours a week, plus now I was going to have to deal with radiation treatments, and I was going to have to go to the hospital and have surgeries, and it just was just such a tumultuous time for me. And I found a coach, a woman that held some classes in her home, and she was gracious enough to allow me to attend, kind of knowing a little bit about my situation. And the biggest thing that I remember taking away from her was to be grateful. And I thought, oh, that's not possible. um, how can you be grateful when your mom just is either sick or dying? How can you be grateful when you're in the midst of such turmoil with that? Then you've got 3 to 4 people that are addicted. You've got friends actually that are struggling with their kids with addiction, and you're trying to help them too, or listen at least to them. And then you wind up pretty sick at the same time. And all through this, you have to work every day. You have to put on a face that nothing's wrong. Boy, I'll tell you, the days I went into the board meetings and I sat there, and I really hoped that none of them knew what was going on, because I really tried very hard not to show anything, no emotion, no sharing of anything that was happening. And I really hoped that I pulled that off, because I really had a lot of respect for the people that I was working with and all of my communities. And I didn't want to frighten them or upset them or make them think that I wasn't going to be a valuable contributor to their organization. So I really tried to put that poker face on, if you will. But when I got home at night, boy, I'll tell you, it was so hard, and there was so very little to find gratitude for. And when I remember the very first time I sat down on my bed at night, and I was determined, the next morning I was going to start my journal. And I started thinking about things, and I was like, I'm not grateful for anything. I don't feel grateful at all. I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm lost, I'm just in turmoil. My heart hurts. But the next morning I got up and I tried, and I couldn't think of anything but tea in my bed. That was literally the two things that I wrote down. I'm grateful for tea and I'm grateful for my bed. And for a few days, that's really all that I was able to find. But after a while, after doing it for, days on end and not allowing myself to falter from that, because I could see that it was making me think about things that were good. And I was not in that headspace at first. Nobody would be, right? You're going through trauma, you're going through problems, and um, you don't want to find the good in life. You just focus so much on the negative, and that's just sort of a natural progression for people. When things start to be traumatic, that's all we focus on, right? But when you force yourself, or when I forced myself, um, I was breaking free from the shame. I was breaking free from the embarrassment. I was breaking free from the frustration. I was breaking free from feeling like useless, not being able to do anything about anything that was going on. Um, and so the list that I was doing, and I was doing it in the morning, was growing. And I was able to get to like 5 things, and then I was able to get to 10 things. And I probably could have kept going. And most mornings I kept it at 10 things, but it was a great way for my mind to start turning towards looking towards the good things. And now it I have to check myself once in a while. I have a little book on my nightstand that, sometimes I'll revisit, am I being grateful? Because there's times I'm not. There's times where I walk through my day and I'm thinking about the problems at work, or I'm thinking about problems with people, or thinking about problems with my kids or my grandkids, or myself even, wanting to do things differently, or be differently, or look differently, or whatever. And so when you start to climb into that turmoil and the anxiousness and the negativity, pessimism, I guess, for me, I check myself, and I start that gratitude list again, because what I noticed through doing that on a regular basis, I didn't think about the negative stuff. I left it to God. And I was not a real God fearing person at the time at all. I mean, I did start seeking God when I got sick, and after my mom passed. um, I definitely sought a relationship with God, with church, and tried to make sense of what was going on with me, and how I could make sure that I was going to be okay after, if I passed. And what I needed to do to save myself, because I knew I had been a sinner. I was not, by far not perfect. I had done things that I should not have done as a young girl, and young lady, and so I knew that I had to atone for those sins, to make sure that, should I die, I was going to be okay. And so I started going back to church, and so that relationship with God helped. But really, what made the biggest difference, honestly, was the desire to stop thinking about the negative things, look to God for His guidance and His assistance, in His Word, which gave me a lot. Like love your neighbor, or love your enemies. Who would have thought that would have been something that somebody who loves to debate and loves to argue and loves to push against the norm, who knew that I could do that I could love people that were coming against me or doing something wrong. It was, at that time, it was just so far from my norm, but that was God. He was making changes in me. Like I had mentioned, I had also, when I was going to church, I also found the laying on of hands, and that just awakened something within me that was not there before. And so through that, and through seeking gratitude and understanding that the more I did that and the more that I sought to be grateful, the better off I was mentally going into each and every day. And I did it in the morning, and I've shared this a long time ago, but I did it in the morning because it focuses your mind to look for the things that are good, because you know the next day you're going to have to write something down, right? But it also, it's like it becomes automatic that you're not looking at the negative, you're actually looking at, well, what is good about this situation? What can be taken and what can be learned and what can be grown from whatever is going on? And so I guess the purpose of this is, that if you're going through trauma or you're trying to heal something or various different things like I was, and there was a lot more, but those were the main things that were happening at that time. I would just say, start with allowing yourself to let it go, that you do not have to control everything. Um, Luckily my family members, most of them learned to take control of their own lives, thank God, and got themselves situated and straightened out, and I thank God for that. Because I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure. But I also knew that I I was doing all I could possibly do, and and I had to be okay with that. I had to know that as much as I wanted to do more, I knew that that wasn't possible, and that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially for a mom, and we want to fix everybody's problems, right? But we can't always do that. We have to let people learn from their own challenges in life. And luckily, for my family, most of them did. And like I said, I thank God for that. But letting go is the first thing. Being able to look at someone and say, "I love you," and I'm here, should you need me. But learning what those boundaries are. You know, not not allowing people to walk over you, which I think a lot of moms do. They don't like confrontation. They don't like to say no. Um, they don't want to allow the bad things to happen to people that they care about. But I think letting go is allowance of their learning process sometimes. At least that's how I saw it at the time, because there was not much more I could do. And then, secondly, like I said, is gratitude, is to focus on even the little things. If you drink coffee in the morning, maybe there's a special coffee you like, so go get that coffee and make sure that's on hand for yourself, so you can have that very small moment of satisfaction and gratitude and appreciate that in your life, because from that it grows that you might be grateful for the people that work at the store that sold it to you, and then you might be grateful for the people in the field that picked the beans, and it just grows, and it grows so big sometimes that you'll shock yourself with some of the things that you're actually, when you look at life the way that it truly is, you'll shock yourself in how much you're just a small piece in this big cogwheel, that there's so many other things to be grateful for, and you don't see it until you start looking for it. And so that helps to alleviate that trauma. It helps to alleviate the stress and the pain that you probably are feeling. So I hope that you find that helpful. And I hope that, through this, that you find strength and you find healing.